Hi, everybody. This is Jennifer from Weinberger Law Group. Thank you again so much for joining us for our webinar today. Today, we're going to be doing part 2 of a webinar that we began last Friday. We have our very special guest, Virginia Gilbert, marriage and family therapist, with us, and we're going to talk about how to overcome parental alienation. Last week, if you missed it, we talked about recognizing the signs of parental alienation, and today we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about the steps you could take to overcome it. As we're live right now, I strongly encourage you to ask any questions that you may have in the chat box underneath the discussion. We'll be discussing as much as we can and answering as many questions as we can as quickly as we can, and follow up with you later after the broadcast. I just want to make sure that we are indeed live here. I'm getting the broadcasting button, but I'm not seeing us on Facebook. Virginia, I'm afraid I'm having the same issue as last time, but let me just make sure. Oh, no, we're good. We are live. I can see us now up on Facebook. Thanks, everybody, for your patience. So, again, feel free to send us a private message if you want to, but if you want to ask live while we're going along, that would be great, too. So, let's get started. I am going to share with everybody my screen. And Virginia, it looks like we're having some problems with screen sharing here. Sorry, everybody. We seem to be having a little bit of technical difficulties here. Virginia, what I think I'm going to do is let's see if we can figure this out here.
I see.
Sorry, everybody. All right. All right, there we go. Live TV, everybody. Sorry about that. All right, so we're going to have Virginia get us started here with overcoming parental alienation, how to reconnect with your children. First and foremost, our disclaimer: this presentation contains general information, does not constitute legal advice. Please be sure to direct specific questions about your own situation to an attorney. Again, talk to us. Send us a thumbs up when you find this information useful. Hopefully you do. Ask us questions again by leaving us a message in the chat box below. We'll do our best to answer them live. The sections we're going to cover today, we're going to recap a little bit about what we talked about last week. What is parental alienation? What do you do when your child doesn't want to see you? Some tips for overcoming parental alienation. At the end, we're going to give you some legal resources that we hope you will find helpful and answer some questions and offer some more information on where you can get additional help. Little quote that we gave you here: although the world is full of suffering, it is also full of the overcoming of it. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Virginia now.
Hi, Jennifer. Thank you for having me back. And I'm glad you read that quote. I just wanted to touch on it a little bit. I think in situations where there's high conflict divorce and parental alienation, it's so wrenching for people. And when you're going through this, if you're going through a custody battle, or if your relationship with your child is strained, it just can feel like the end of the world, like it's never going to get better. And I want to say to people that it can, it does, it will, you know, we just don't hear stories a lot of people who overcome these bad situations. That in the media, we sort of pick up these worst case scenarios. So today, I want to talk a little bit about how to manage parental alienation situations so that you can improve your own life and your relationship with your child. So what is parental alienation? So parental alienation is like a cult. There is a cult leader who is the alienating parent, and they operate by kind of developing propaganda like a cult leader would for the children. So they do and they say things that over time can brainwash the child into believing the other parent is bad. Alienating parents have very black and white worldviews. They're very rigid. You know, anybody who's with them is good and anybody who's not on their team is bad. There just is not a lot of gray. They look for a target of blame for their problems. They are not going to take accountability for their part in the end of the marriage. They're not going to take accountability for co-parenting issues. They really operate by looking for somebody to blame, and that person, if you are their ex, that unfortunately is you, and then you become the targeted parent. What do you do when your child doesn't want to see you? Tough situation, but there are things to do.
Virginia, you're so encouraging, even from our talk last week. And the quote that you had selected to put in here. It's nice to know that, you know, you can offer people some hope.
Yes. Thank you. Trying to parent a child who believes you're evil is challenging. Yeah. And it's usually some combination of evil, stupid, and incompetent and crazy. Those are the things that are part of the propaganda that the alienating parent perpetuates. And what they do is they undermine your authority as a parent. So visitation can become very challenging if a kid questions your authority or is so distraught not being with the alienating parent that they can't have a good time at your house. So if that's the situation that you find yourself in, what you need to do is learn more about parental alienation and come up with strategies for overcoming it. Tips for overcoming, parental alienation. This is really important. Address lies and bad mouthing. Conventional divorce wisdom says you never respond to bad mouthing from your ex. You take the high road, and the thinking is that if you respond to it, your kids will just hear you bad mouthing the other parent, and they'll feel caught in the middle, and they'll think badly of you, and it'll come back to haunt you, and all things that on the surface are true. And certainly if you have sort of a good enough divorce, that wisdom, that conventional wisdom applies, but not in a situation where you have parental alienation. It's kind of like I tell people, if you had a coworker who was making up egregious things about you, and getting you in trouble with the boss, would you just stand silently by, kind of smiling and rise above it? And you wouldn't. You would say, hey, this is what's really going on, because you have your reputation to uphold. Well, that's the situation you're in now. Your kids need to hear your side of the story, but there is a protocol for telling your side of the story. There's a very specific way to do it. Your ex, the alienating parent, is generally kind of emotionally wound up and says really extreme things and appears upset when they talk. You want to be the opposite of that. So you want to state the facts. You want to state your side of the story in a very even-handed tone. You don't want to come off highly emotional. You certainly don't want to badmouth your ex, even if you think they're crazy and they're driving you crazy. You don't want to say that. You want to respond to whatever the lie is. So you say, yeah, I showed up for visitation last week at the regular time. I was knocking at the door. Mommy had, taken you somewhere and you weren't there. And I texted and I called and I emailed and I waited for 2 hours and she didn't come back. And that's what happened. I don't know why she said I wasn't there. I would never not show up on visitation. And I'm going to come next week. And if you have any questions about what's going on, I want you to come to me directly. And I'm really sorry that this happened to you. It must have been very upsetting and stressful. So that's a way of saying things where you acknowledge that there was an untruth told, but you don't get into why your ex did it. Of course, you have, they're out to get you. You don't want to say that. You just say, I can't speak for the other parent, but this is what happened. And you need to be prepared to repeat your story often, because when your children are with your ex, they're getting this sort of constant propaganda. So you have to refute that, but again, in this kind of very patient, balanced way that I explained. You need to be prepared to repeat your story often. Yeah, so it's very important to tell your child to come to you with concerns instead of going through the other parent. That will take them out of the middle, and it's age appropriate. You're teaching them life skills. You don't want them to grow up and be in situations where they have a problem with somebody and they triangulate someone else because they can't deal directly with the person with whom they have a problem. So this is a life skill that you're teaching them, really. If you're angry or upset with me, please come to me directly. Your child might not believe you. You could be saying the most obvious thing in the world, and they may not believe you because they're so kind of tangled up in what the alienating parent is telling them. But your child will have heard your side of the story, which is really important. Your child can also reflect on your story as he grows up. So something he doesn't understand at 6 will probably make a lot more sense at 16. And keep in mind that very young children, it doesn't feel safe for them a lot of the time to stand up against the alienating parent. So they may always feel like, well, don't totally trust mom if that's the alienator. But I'm scared. I can't. It's not safe for me to like dad or to question mom. But that child at 16 may be much more individuated and may be able to stand up against the alienating parent a little bit more. And your story will have made more sense, but it will have made more sense because they grew up hearing it. It's not like 10 years went by and you're just now telling them what happened. That's why it's important that they get the story all the way along. So another thing that's really important to do is to manage your emotions. Situations where there's parental alienation they create drama, and alienating parents have a way of just pushing your buttons because they're good at creating drama and they want to stay engaged with you. And the way they do that is to create conflict. And it's very difficult when your kid comes back repeating all kinds of nonsense about you, or things that they just shouldn't have heard, or, stuff like, well, daddy left both of us, and that's why the marriage is over. So, people hear things like this, and it's understandable that you would get upset or you would get angry, but you have to keep in mind that you have to come across as a very calm, balanced person with your children, or else they might think, well, I guess, mom is right about daddy. Daddy's scary. So one thing that can happen sometimes is alienating parents are very good at creating these high drama situations and then sort of provoking you and like taking a snapshot of you at your worst and then turning that into the narrative of who you are. So for instance, again, dad comes, and I also want to point out that mom is not always the alienator. I'm just kind of using that in these scenarios, but dad can also be an alienator. So for example, dad comes for visitation and he's knocking at the door and he knows mom is in there with the kids and mom won't come to the door. And he's knocking on the door and he's calling and he's texting, and maybe this is the third weekend in a row that this has happened, and maybe dad had, there's like tickets to Disneyland and this is a big deal today and mom is not answering the door. So dad kind of blows up. He starts screaming, maybe he's like cursing, the neighbors hear, maybe the police get called, and mom says, well, he's dangerous, he's threatened me, I'm scared, the kids are hearing all this, they get scared. Maybe dad even gets arrested. So this is a situation that understandably is so upsetting to dad, and it's so unjust and it's so manipulative. But if dad doesn't control his emotions, he can end up kind of playing into mom's narrative, which will the kids will see that and they'll kind of, well, here's evidence, mom is right. So you want to make sure that you don't come across as scary, crazy, incompetent, whatever mom is saying about you or dad is saying about you. If you find yourself struggling with anger, you're really irritable, or maybe you're really sad, and you're not functioning at your best around your kids, it's time to get help. Do not white knuckle the situation. We all need support. What's really important is that you develop coping skills that you can use when you're triggered. So you can get counseling, you can do meditation, journaling can be really helpful to people. You journal all your feelings and get them out. Physical exercise, whatever works for you and calms you down, do it. It's helpful to even make a list of coping skills that you can use when you feel triggered, because what you want to do is you want to build your internal resources so that when this drama comes your way, you will be able to pause when you feel triggered and use your coping skills and regulate yourself so you don't react in a way that invites more conflict or proves, and I say proves with quotation marks, that you are an unfit parent. Continue reaching out even if you no longer have custody. This is so important. And it's not just if you don't have custody. Sometimes visitation becomes so difficult because you have a kid who defies your authority, or, you know, the weekends with you or the time with you becomes so disruptive that, you know, perhaps visitation doesn't happen that often. You don't want to just wander off the reservation. You need to email your child, text your child, call your child, send birthday gifts, show up at school events, unless attending a school event would create a sort of a public display of conflict. But otherwise, show up at school events. Show that you are a parent. You may not get a response back from a child when you do these things. Some of it could be, you know, if you got a teenager, they don't respond anyway a lot of the time, even in the best of situations. So it could have nothing to do with the divorce. But don't interpret a lack of response that your kid doesn't care. He may be trying to test your commitment. And there have been studies done of adult children of parental alienation, and they often say, you know, years later, if a parent has just gotten fed up and kind of drifted away, when they reunite with that parent, they say, why didn't you rescue me? I figured you knew what was going on, and, you know, Dad was crazy and I was scared of him, and, you know, you were my other parent, and you know, why didn't you know that I just couldn't respond to you? So you need to be the adult in this situation. It's very painful to have a kid who appears not to care about you, but you need to be the adult and continue reaching out. Do your part to maintain the relationship, because, you know, 10 years down the line, they'll look back and they'll go, Mom never stopped trying. Dad never stopped trying. So
Regina, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just had a quick question.
Sure.
If you're sending things like cards and birthday gifts to your child, what happens if, say, you know, Dad's sending a birthday gift or a card or something like that to the house, and Mom is either like getting them and throwing them out or sending them back? Is there anything you can do?
That happens, and I'm glad you asked that question. I mean, one thing you can do is you make a copy of, let's say it's a birthday card, you make a copy of it. You can send something certified mail so that you actually have a receipt. You can, you know, keep a journal of each time that you sent something. So at least you know, you have evidence. You know, on March 5th, 2015, I sent you this gift, and I'm sorry, you know, you didn't get it.
Thank you.
Sure. If withdrawing is the only viable option, write a letter, which really speaks to what I've been saying. If you're deciding not to fight for custody anymore, because you've been doing it for so long, or if visits with your child are becoming so chaotic, you may decide that ending a custody battle or trying to keep visitation going, or not keeping visitation going is the best option, but you don't want to withdraw without an explanation. So you want to write your child a text or a letter explaining why you're withdrawing. You want to clarify that you're not withdrawing because you don't care, because you don't love your child, because you went off and, you know, started a new family. You are withdrawing because you feel, after all attempts have been made to work out the conflict, that efforts to maintain a really active parenting relationship are creating more conflict, and that withdrawing appears to be the only way you have at this point of reducing conflict, and that is in the best interest of the child. You want to stress that you are available whenever the child is ready for a relationship, that you are always there as an open door policy. You will always love your child. You will always be their parent, even if you're not actively involved in their life. So it's really important because I think alienated parents, they hear a lot from people. Well, you can't stop fighting for custody. You know, you can't let go of your child. And so there's a lot of shaming that goes on with alienated parents. And what I want to say is that everybody else is not you. They're not dealing with your ex. They don't, you know, it's not their finances that are being drained. Only you know kind of psychologically what you are capable of doing. So withdrawing, as long as it's done with intention and you know why you're doing it, it's not giving up. What you're really doing in the big picture is you're taking your kid out of a war zone. You are creating space for him to come back to you on his own terms. And that's really good because he doesn't have that space with the alienating parent. He's responsible to provide emotionally to the alienating parent. He has no room to be his own person or have his own thoughts or feelings. So you are showing him what it's like to have a healthy relationship. You are empowering your child. And it's just really important to keep that in mind so that you don't beat yourself up, because you've done everything you could to maintain an active relationship. And you just need to keep in mind that this may be paradoxically the way to get it back. You know, it may not happen next month, it may not happen next year, but, you know, eventually kids grow up, they figure out what's gone on, they leave the home of the alienating parent, and they're then freer to come back and have a relationship with you.
Well, I guess that's my cue now to jump in and take over where Virginia leaves off as our marriage and family therapist and put on my attorney hat and talk to you about what you can do legally if your child is being alienated from you. So first and foremost, parental alienation and the courts. Thankfully, more and more courts here in the Garden State are beginning to recognize and address cases of parental alienation. Now, obviously, it's not a good thing that there are cases of parental alienation, but it's good to know that judges are recognizing it and addressing it more and more. First bit of advice, and this is really, really important. If you don't already have a formal order for parenting time or for custody, and you've been attempting up until this point to sort of work it out with your child's other parent, you really need to get yourself down to the courthouse, because attempting to work it out is not working. And you need a formalized court order that lays out what kind of custody you have. Is it joint legal custody, which is important because having legal custody allows you to make decisions for the child, big decisions, religion, schooling, medical decisions. You're allowed to go and look at their pediatrician records, things like that. So that's really important to have. You want your parenting time order to be very specific. How much time are you to spend with your child, alternating weekends? Perhaps you want to and can have a shared physical custody where each of you alternates a week or has 4 days on and 3 days off. If you can do that with your job and your situation and you feel like that's something that is in the best interest of your child, go ahead and ask for that. Your formalized order should also talk about holidays. How are you going to split the holidays, share the holidays? What are the most important holidays in your family? So sit down with a calendar. The court calendar is best. It has all the holidays you could think of throughout the year, and begin to devise a plan that works for the entire family. Don't forget, judges make custody and parenting time decisions based on what's in the best interest of the children. That's the overarching principle that all courts look at when they're making these types of decisions. If your child is being manipulated, tell the judge that. So the judge is aware there may be a situation of parental alienation that is happening. If it is severe, the judge may order your child to be evaluated by somebody like Virginia. The judge may order that your child, you, and your ex are also evaluated by an independent psychologist who can tell the judge what is going on with your family and make an independent determination, submit a report, and testify in court if need be. Now, if you already have a court order that talks about your custody and your parenting time and your holiday schedule and your vacations, but your ex is simply not following it, then you need to file a motion with the court to enforce that court order, telling the judge, listen, I'm supposed to have my child every other weekend and one overnight every week. I go there, my child isn't there, child's not answering the phone, we're supposed to Skype every night, that's not happening, and tell the judge you want this court order enforced. Again, the judge is going to look at all the factors, possibly get a psychologist involved, but you need to get to the court and assert your rights. File the motion to enforce your rights. It may seem silly if you're at the point where your parent is actively trying to alienate your child from you to sit down in a mediation session, but if the judge orders it, go. Why do we recommend that you do that? Well, for two reasons. Number one, if the judge orders it, it's a court order and you have to follow a court order. You don't want to go back to the judge and explain why you defied their court order. Never a good idea. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is you may be surprised. Maybe your ex will, quote unquote, see the light when they have a third party trained mediator guiding the sessions and letting both of you know really what the law is and what the best way to proceed is for your child. So hopefully you'll be pleasantly surprised. You have nothing to lose, and you'll certainly look to the court as if you tried. Keep a record of everything that's happening with respect to your child. Keep a journal. Virginia mentioned journaling earlier as a way to sort of vent your emotions, but this type of journal really is a record of what's happening. February 3rd, I went to pick up my son. We were supposed to have parenting time. My wife didn't answer the door. I attempted to call my son on the cell phone that I had gotten for him. My ex picked up and hung up. It's important for you to write down all of these instances. So when and if you have to go to court, you have a good record to provide to the judge. Also, keep any inflammatory text messages, ones that say you're never going to see your child again, or ones that are threatening. Keep a record of those also for proofs in court. Same goes for any abusive or threatening emails or aggressive or violent or profane voicemails. You want to save all of these things. And just as Virginia said, our last point there, don't give up. You may have to back off in order to give your child that sort of safe, calm space that Virginia talked about. But, fighting in the courts is something that is separate from, seeing your child physically. Don't give up the fight legally. Don't give up your rights. File those motions. Get down to the court. Have your voice heard. Well, that's it for our presentation today. I want to remind you, please don't forget to subscribe to our Facebook events tab. You'll be notified when we have other webinars that we try to do weekly. There's the web address for you to do that. And here's our contact information. If you need further information, you can give us a call. Our toll-free number is there, 888-855-3014. We have offices throughout New Jersey. We're a statewide practice, and we can help you really with any family law issue that you may have. Give us an email. Visit our website at weinbergerlawgroup.com. There you'll find more information not only about parental alienation, but also issues such as custody, divorce, parenting time, etc. Again, I want to thank Virginia for co-hosting with me and being a fantastic guest. We really appreciate having her at our fingertips to help us with the psychological piece of not only parental alienation, but anything and all things psychology related. We love having Virginia as part of our family. So thanks to her again. And at this point, I'm going to end with you, and we will see you next time on our next webinar. We hope you enjoyed it. Please like and share, and we'll talk to you soon.